1 Corinthians 7:25. Paul's talking about all the single people in Corinth, and this will be instructive for many of us because our culture really parallels Corinth in a lot of ways. Now, concerning the betrothed or the single people, I have no command from the Lord, but I give my judgment as one by who the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think that in view of the present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. And we looked at divorce last week. Are you free from a wife? In other words, are you single? Do not seek a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if the betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. Yet those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I wish that I would spare you that. You're like, oh, preach on, brother. Preach on. Preach on. You're like, wow, this really is God's word. That's amazing. That applies to my life right there. Verse 29, this is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. Underline this sentence. Underline the sentence. For the present form of the world is passing away. Paul has just gotten done saying that no matter what your life situation is, do not be overly concerned about it, because what you're concerned about now will soon pass. Verse 32, I want you to be free from anxiety. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about worldly things and how to please his wife. Amen? All the ladies are laughing. The men are like, I better not say nothing right now. And his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about the worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. If anyone thinks he is not behaving properly toward his betrothed, in other words, kind of like an engaged type of scenario, if his passions are strong, and it has to be, let him do as he wishes, let them marry. It is no sin. But whoever is firmly established in his heart, being under no necessity, but having his desire under control, and he has determined this in his heart to keep her as his betrothed, or them to stay single and apart, he will do well. So then, he who marries his betrothed does well, but he who refrains from marriage will do even better. A wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is free to marry whoever she wishes, but only in the Lord. Yet in my judgment, she is happier if she remains as she is, and I think that I too have the Spirit of God. So for many of us, we grew up in homes that give us no education on how to date. Right? Right. I mean, for many of us, it was like a free-for-all. Like when you came out of puberty or whatever, and you were like 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever it was for you, and all of a sudden, you went from boys are nice little play friends on the street to all of a sudden, boom, oh my. And those little girls that you used to play with down the street, all of a sudden, boom shaka, wow. You are a fine young lady. What happened? All of a sudden, your mind and your body goes from innocence all of a sudden to, oh my. And for many of us, we had no guidance how to go from hello to oh my. We had no guidance from anybody. And so when we started dating, whenever that was for you, we had no idea what to do. And for many of us that grew up without any guidance at all, it wasn't long before we were sexually promiscuous, before we were looking for love truly in all the wrong places. We were being manipulated and manipulating others. And so when we decided there was a person to get married to, we really had no value system for why we were marrying that person, other than, you're pretty good looking. I'm pretty good looking. Let's make good looking kids. I mean, we had no value. It's like, I guess we should get married. I'm getting kind of old, so we better hook up. Think about the scenario you were at when you were first deciding to get married. For many of us, we had no idea why we got married, other than maybe we felt pressure or whatever. Paul's going to let us in on a little secret this morning. So whether you're married now, whether you're looking forward to get married, whether you never want to be married again or ever, Paul's going to give us something very instructive this morning, so check this out. The aha moment for the Corinthians, the first one. How should I view my singleness? Because for many of us that have been single for years or we're single right now, it either is totally depressing to us because we wish we were dating, or it's a great time of life because we can do whatever we want without any restraints. Nope, we don't have to check in with anybody. Those of us that are married looking back to our single days go, single days when I could run off to Vegas and not have to tell anybody where I was going. Regardless of where you find yourself this morning, how should you view the singleness you're in now, or how should you have viewed your singleness before you got married? Because this may have affected who you married based on how you viewed your singleness back in the day. Watch this. Having both, how should I view my singleness? Having both Greek and Roman influences, Corinth had a high view of sexual freedom and a low view of marriage. Pretty true of today, right? High view of sexual, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'll do what I want. You're not my body. So quit telling me what I'm going to do with my body. That's the attitude that our society has, right? I do what I want, and it's on me. If it doesn't affect you, then shut your mouth. Right? That's the attitude that most people have. And they have a low view of marriage. So you can run off and have Elvis do your wedding, right? We talked about that last week. You know, you do the drive-through. Congratulations, you're married. Hey. Right? For $29.95 or $300. I got corrected on that last week. I guess it's $300 now for Elvis to do your wedding. It was like $19.95 back in the day. And so regardless of how you got married, you realize at that moment that there was something different about your life. But you may not have realized that God wanted that marriage to last for your whole life. Rather than just when you left Vegas, you're kind of going, what did I just do? I feel hungover. I got a wife. What just happened? So when you got home and things don't start going well because you didn't really decide correctly about how or who to marry, it's very easy for all of us to say, I don't even want to be with you anymore. What was even that about that we had in Vegas? What was that thing? I mean, who cares? We got married by Elvis? I'm out. And so we get a lawyer for $300. And so we get divorced. And so in our society, easy to hook up, easy to get divorced. Exact same way in Corinth 2,000 years ago. And we talked about divorce last week. You could literally write somebody a piece of paper. You didn't have to go through a lawyer. Julie, Jackson, whatever your name was, I can't remember, and you're gone. Okay, thanks for coming by. Wife, ex-wife, see ya. It was that easy to dismiss your marriage and all your commitments and your vows. And we're getting to that in our society, right? It's almost valueless. The marriage ceremony is almost valueless. And I do marriage ceremonies all the time. Because if there's no commitment there, because the marriage commitment goes deeper than your rings and ceremony, right? Because this ring isn't going to keep you from sleeping with other people, right? The ring doesn't cry out to you going, this is a bad idea. It's always about the commitment, right? There's no special magic in wedding rings. All this is a reminder of a commitment you made in the past, right? There's no magic here. It's just a reminder of the covenant and the commitment you made. So watch what Paul says. He goes, if you're single, let's be very clear that if you're single and you want to get married, God expects more out of you than just a rings and ceremony. He expects that covenant to last your whole life. Through the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, the poors, the rich. He expects that to last. Because he holds you to your covenant. Whether Elvis married you or a nice pastor married you. You made a covenant. So, if you aren't ready for that covenant, be very careful in your single years what you think about marriage. Because if you don't think correctly about it, you're going to be skewed once you get married. And this is exactly what was happening in Corinth. This high view of sexual freedom and low view of marriage created domestic issues which resulted in a high divorce rate, producing single divorcees or single adults who had never married. Additionally, Paul mentions a present distress, which may have been a persecution against Christians or a famine, endangering those who wanted to get married or start a family. Because of this, Paul encourages the Christians to be wise about how they spend their time and not be in a hurry to get married, as marriage reorients a person's time and priorities. Is that not true? Ladies, before you were married, you had your own little life all set up, and then all of a sudden you got married, and all of a sudden babies came along and screaming and crying at 3 a.m, and you go, what happened to the good old days? Guys, you get married, and you're like, you can spend any amount of money at any time on anything, and all of a sudden you got to go down to Target to buy trash bags because you're out of trash bags, and you're like, what happened to my life? My wife just told me to go buy trash bags. I had a life one time, and then marriage happened. See, for many of us, we look at marriage like an add-on to our single life. Marriage is not an add-on to our single life. Marriage is actually a reorientation of our life. But for many of us, we want to live like a married single person. We want to be married but single. We want somebody to be there, but we really don't want them to be there. We want to come home to somebody, but we'd rather have our home to ourselves. It's the dysfunction of our culture, where we look at marriage like an add-on to our lives, like what's it going to do for me rather than what can I give to it? Because if it's all about you, you're going to get divorced. Because at some point you're going to get really angry, and it's going to be disappointing, and you're going to get depressed, and you're going to say, I'm out of here because I want to go back to the good old days. But God says this, when you get married, it's not about you, and it's not about you, it's about we. So when you're single, you don't look at your wedding, you don't look at your marriage and you say, what is in it for me? You say, what can I bring to this? Because when you say, by your own attitude in your heart, what can I bring to this? You're ultimately saying, if two people are saying, what can I bring to add to this oneness? Now, together, we can go through anything. Because we're focused on us, on togetherness, rather than what's in it for me as an individual. Because anytime people are just concerned about their own little individual islands, you're headed for Splitsville. Because, listen, there are no islands inside of marriage. There are no little islands. There can be a man cave, praise God. But there are no little islands. If you need to go out to the garage and have a Schlitz and watch football, good for you. But that's not your little escape from the real world of marriage, okay? I don't know why I always use Schlitz. It's the worst thing in the whole world. Here's what I want you to see. So watch what Paul's going to tell the single divorcees of Corinth, high divorce rate, a bunch of single, used to be married people now, and single people that are living sexually expressing themselves outside of marriage. They're being promiscuous. They're expressing their sexuality outside of God's design of marriage. So what does Paul tell them? He tells them this. He tells them, the time is short. Your lifespan is short. And I talked a little bit about it during the offering. Your lifespan is very short. You'd be lucky to get 80 years out of your life. So how you spend this time is very instructive. And if you're going to choose marriage, understand you're not choosing marriage to say, what's in it for me? You're choosing marriage to say, all my priorities are now reoriented towards us. And in our society, that's very difficult because we train our kids to be independent and tough and all about us and go to school and be a part of the things just that you want to be a part of. We don't actually train our kids how to be a good married person. Previous generations helped their kids understand what it meant to be married. We don't even tell our kids anymore, right? When we hear our kids want to get married, we just go, awesome, yay! And I didn't talk to them one time about what it meant to be a married woman or how to lead your home as a married man. I trained my kids how to be all about self. And in Corinth, it was the same way. Everybody was about self, and if marriage kind of got in the way, we just cut it off. And that's why all of us, especially as parents, if you have single people in your home, you need to be very careful about your own marriage, how you view it, and number two, you want to tell your kids, marriage is not an add-on to your life. Marriage is actually a reorientation of your life. That this is now who you are. I'm a married man. I'm not a single guy living my life with some rings. But many times in our society, that's the way we want it to be. We want marriage to kind of be an add-on, but I kind of want to live my own little life. And Paul goes, nope. As a single person, you need to be about either serving the Lord as a single person, or if you're going to get married, realize it's going to reorient your whole life. Because of this, Paul encourages the Corinthians to be wise about how they spend their time and not be in a hurry to get married, as marriage reorients a person's time and priorities. The Bible primarily uses 3 words for time. What's the word time? It's a Greek word chronos, where we get the word chronology from. Or you see sometimes watches say, it's a chronos watch. It means this is the elapsed amount of time. Something happened in space and time. The next word is kairos, which is a time for something like, this is our opportunity to possibly go to Margarita Middle School. This is our time. When people say, this is our time, my son's on TVHS football team. He's a quarterback for TVHS, and many times I'm one of the coaches, and so we gather all the guys together, and we go, hey, this is our time. I don't mean like, this is 4:07 in the afternoon. It's not chronos, it's kairos. It's like, this is our time. Rise up. I've trained you. You were built for this moment. You've worked hard for this moment. And now this is the time where we go do what we're called to do. And so right here, Paul says, he uses the same word in chapter 7. He goes, this is the time. The time is short. Our time for opportunity is very short. So if you're going to be single, be about the things of God. If you're going to get married, be about the things of God. So whether you're single or whether you're married, you be about the things of God. Because this is our time. This is our time. Watch. Many of us have very limited amount of opportunities in life. And when those moments come, you must seize them. Called seize the day, right? It comes from that exact same idea. That God only gives us so long of a life, and even inside of that life, we only have so much opportunity. And sometimes the opportunities go away. There was a moment in time we should have seized it, but we let it go. And Paul says, you must seize every moment for the glory of God. Every moment of your married or single life, you seize for the glory of God. Because if you miss it, you lose the opportunity, and you lose the blessing. And the third one is aeon, which we get the English word eon, like, oh gosh, this sermon's been eons long. Oh gosh, when is lunch? We get that word eon from that Greek word, which literally means like on, and in the Hebrews would use that word when they wrote in Greek to mean forever. God is an eternal being. He's eons and eons, endless ages. That's the word they would use for it. Time is a person's most precious commodity. And the Bible encourages believers to seek the glory of God and fill their moments with service to Him. How a person spends their time directly relates to the value the person had for it. And I even put this in italics. More time equals what? More important. For some of you guys, Facebook is the most important thing that was ever created in the history of humanity. Because you spend more time flipping through, oh my gosh, those shoes. Oh, God. I'll like it anyway just because I don't want her to be mad. Oh, dude, their kids are so ugly, but I'll press like. I mean, if truly the principle is the more time you spend on something, the more important it is to you, if that principle is true, which it must be true because we only have a certain amount of time to live, so the more time you spend on a certain thing, that must mean the more important it is to you, then think about how we spend our days. So concerned about wealth or relationships or our Facebook status or how many followers we have on this, that, or in Twitter land. At the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. At the end of the day, what matters is God. At the end of the day, what matters is God. And have you seized every opportunity for the glory of God? Because as a single person, You have time. And that's what Paul is saying here. You have time. Single people, you have time. And if you're wasting your time as a single person just saying, oh, I wish I was married, or wishing about the next day or whatever, you are missing the opportunities that God has for you every day. There's nothing more empty than living your life every day for yourself. There's nothing more empty than living every day what's going to make me happy today. That's how you end up an alcoholic. That's how you end up a meth addict. That's how you end up on the street. Because nothing says I can't stand my own life more than what's in it for me today. Because watch, if all you're concerned about every day when you get up is yourself, or how to make yourself happy, when your day doesn't end up being about self, or doesn't make you happy, then you're depressed. And the reason you're depressed is not because God has failed, but you have failed to find God in that day. You have not taken control of the opportunities, the kairos of that moment, and said, what's in it right now for God, not for me? Because we've trained ourselves to be selfish. We've trained our spiritual life to be inverted and to look inside. So rather than having our eyes look outside and going, what's in it for God today, they've gone inverted and go, what's in it for me? And you look at the inside of your own head. And it's known that we don't know where we're going because you're looking at the back of your own head. Singleness is a gift for a season of life or for your whole life, and should be viewed as a gift of freedom to serve God. To express the focus believers should have for God's kingdom, especially single Christians, Paul describes the worldly concerns in this life as a present form that is passing away. And I told you to underline that verse. In verse 31, for the present form of this world is passing away. This phrase is borrowed from the theater and describes a complete change of scenery. So 2,000 years ago, if you were watching a play in Corinth or in Athens, you were sitting as part of the theater. They're still there to this day. You can go to Corinth, you can go to Caesarea, you can still see the amphitheaters that they would sit in, the stone amphitheaters. You see them in Rome too, for that matter. You can sit down literally the same place people sat 2,000 years ago, and you watch gladiator games or a play or a battle recreated. And what they would do is they would set up this whole scene is people would rush out, kind of like they do at like a junior high play or whatever. And they grab something else. And they would set up this whole scene. And so you're sitting there watching in Rome or Athens or whatever, and you're watching them set up this little play, the setup for this little play. And then the actors come in, like Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, and everyone has their time. We just are merely players. It's also a Rush song, but I'll move on. They set up this play, but immediately when that part of the play, when that scene is over, everybody just goes. And they clear the stage, and they bring in the next pieces. And the Greek phrase that Paul uses here when he wrote in this part of the letter, the Corinthians would have understood, oh, he's talking about life being just transitory. Literally, our life just comes in and goes out. We come across the stage, here's the length of my life, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 80, and exit the stage. And while I'm here, there's a certain place set in my life that I'm a part of. We're in Temecula right now, or wherever you live, or wherever you're listening to me on the internet, or whatever. This is part of your life. But as your life goes, your scenery changes, and it's totally transitory, just like your life, until the day you and I die, and we go see the eternal God that never dies. We will go see the God that never changes. We will go see the God that does not change like shifting shadows and a play set. His set is eternal. We just play momentarily through his eternal set. And Paul says, if you're single, why in the world are you wasting your life? If you're single, why are you wasting your life and rather not taking advantage of the opportunities that God gives you every day? Because what you spend your time on is what you're saying is most important to you. Because you're only here for this long. It's like a changing play set. The form of this life is just passing away, like a theater. The temporary form of everything on earth, including the good state of marriage, should never be a person's sole focus or source of happiness, but only in God alone. You can't imagine how many times I especially hear this from young ladies when I'm talking to them about getting married, and they say, oh gosh, I'm like 23, my clock's ticking, I gotta get cracking on this family thing going on here. And all the ladies that are like 30 out there, they're going, wow, 23, that's pretty young. I remember those days. And how many young ladies are like, I can't wait to get married, I can't wait to find Mr. Right. And for all the young ladies out there that are married now that thought they found Mr. Right, they're like, wow, hang on for a little bit longer, young single lady. And the point is that there is no Mr. Right. There's no Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. There's just you. And there's just him. Two imperfect people that are going to try to live together. And the only way that works is if you don't say what's in it for me, you say what's in it for us. And ultimately, what's in it for God's glory. Because whether you're single, you can glorify God, or whether you're married, your marriage can glorify God. Don't look at the other person and go, man, I can't wait to marry her because she's going to make me happy. I can't wait to marry him because I'll finally be a happy young lady. You can never find happiness in another person. You only find happiness in God. Because here's the reason. People will let you down. I will let you down. Your parents will let you down. You'll let your own self down. How in the world can you expect another person to make you happy when you can't even make yourself happy? If other people could make you happy, or you could make your own self happy, you'd already be happy. The reason you're dysfunctional and jacked up is because you can't. And the reason that is true is because we're all broken and we need the healing, restorative power of Jesus to change our lives. Listen, marriage is not a fix-all. Single people go, if I could just get married, I'll be happy. You won't. In fact, sometimes your problems will compound. And you go, why did I ever do that? If marriage made everybody happy, they'd never look back and want to get divorced or say, why should I ever got married? They'd never say that because marriage makes them happy. But the whole point that people get divorced is marriage doesn't make you happy. It just makes you different. So whether you're single or whether you're married, it's always about Jesus. It always is. And Paul says, your life is fading as we speak. As I stand here, our lives are fading. And we must take advantage of every kairos, of every moment, and not let it go to waste. Because literally our lives change like a Facebook status. I'm in the bathroom right now. Did I need to know that? I mean, well, what's going on? It's like our lives are fading like that. Like something that just goes into the air and gone. And Paul goes, live for something eternal. Put your life into something that's real. Because God is real. Number 2, the aha moment. Number 1 was, how should I view my singleness? And the aha moment for that was, you view it as every moment for the glory of God. If God leads you to get married, awesome, go get married. But if God wants you to stay single, you stay single. You live every moment for the glory of God. Whether you're at your job that you may or may not like, whether you're at home, whatever you do, you draw yourself closer to the Lord. Number 2, the aha moment. How do I date and honor God? So this is going to be instructive for some of you single people, or you're raising kids right now and they're going to have to face this someday. So, I have a son that I love very much, and he's entering this realm. And so for me as a father, it's been very instructive to view myself through 14, 15-year-old eyes. Because I remember when I was that age going, girls exist, awesome. And I also remember going, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so it's been good for me as a father to help my son realize it. And I literally had this conversation last night. Because there's a fine young lady that came to my house last night, and here's the way I deal with things in my family, okay? So many of you are glad you're not my child, okay? All right? Let's just be clear about that. So here's the way we deal with dating in my house. Dating is ridiculous and stupid, and no one should do it, okay? There's no such thing as dating in the Bible, and there's a reason for that, which I'm going to get to in a moment. But here's the way we deal with it in my house, ready? we don't encourage ever single one-on-one dating, okay? We do what's called family dating. All the single ladies are loving that, right? So this is the way we do it in my house. It's whether I have a daughter, whether I have a son, it doesn't matter. If you're thinking about liking my son or my daughter, you will come to my house. Even if you're a young lady, which happened yesterday. And you will hang out with my family. And I will get to know your family. And we will make sure that our families know what's going on with our kids. And our kids never go alone to do things, to go on road trips together or whatever. Our families, or the parts thereof, do dating together. Because in the reality, there's nothing that you can't do in a family together on a date that you shouldn't be doing alone in the back of a movie theater on a date, right? Oh, wow. We got one person that's still awake. Praise God. So watch, because it's going to be helpful. Because listen, many of us had no help when we were younger, right? We just did whatever felt good for the moment, and we suffered the consequences of that because nobody guided us. For many of us, if we would have had an involved father, a loving, involved father in our lives, it would have transformed the way we dated, some of the people we were with. But many of us, either dad checked out, we didn't know who our dad was or whatever, and we had no guidance. And so here's the thing, is there's nothing more safe than doing relational one-on-one things, one, God's way, and two, the way God protects singles is through other people. You either do group dates, you do family dates, or whatever, until it comes to the point where I'm not expecting my 15-year-old son to go get married next week. Hopefully, okay? That's not in the cards. Theoretically, if he's older, you can do more, obviously, single type of one-on-one types of things, but it never starts out like that. It never starts out one-on-one, hey, let's go be alone together, whatever. It's always about family. For this reason, when you get married, who do you actually marry? You actually marry that jacked up family, right? That you didn't realize you were getting, right? The in-laws of like, oh no, those people. But watch this. Our culture is always individualistic. What's in it for me? Blah, blah, we just talked about all that. It's always singular individualistic. So we think when we get married, it's still all about me and blah, 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 and still all about us. Actually, when you get married to your spouse, it's actually all about them and all about their family, right? A la Thanksgiving is coming up. And you're going to have to decide what family you're going to or not going to because Uncle Weirdo's there or whatever. Here's my point. My point is, if you would have integrated the family into your choice beforehand, one, you would have had more knowledge of who you're getting. And two, the family could have spoken into that relationship and go, he's not good for you. He doesn't respect you. He's become an idol to you. You're just so desperate for a boyfriend or a husband that you're just doing these things that aren't even you. If you don't have those words speaking into you as a young lady or as a young man, you can be deceived and think, oh, this relationship's all about yay, 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 and you get married and go, what the heck did I just do with Elvis or whatever in Vegas? I mean, I got married to wow. So here's the thing. Here's what Paul says, and this is the way dating, quote unquote, dating has been done for the majority of history up until the modern era. How can I date and honor God? For most of history, finding a mate required the involvement of parents and family, either through arranged marriages or courting with parental oversight. Wouldn't it be awesome if your parents could choose your mate? You're like, that sounds like a nightmare and a half. But watch this. Watch this. Watch this. All the parents are like, praise God, preach on, son. Let's go. And this is what I tell Caleb. The church does that before, large contingent of Indians. Not American Indians, but actual across the ocean Indians. And their culture still to this day does arranged marriages. And they would do it, in our church. And the way they would do it is, say, I have a son. They choose 4 or 5 young ladies. And they say, son, voila. You can choose from any of these nice young ladies. Or if you have a young lady, you can say, here's 5 fine young men. You get a choice within our choice. It's kind of like God's sovereignty. He is sovereign, but we get a choice even inside of his choosing. It's a mystery, but it works. Watch how amazing this is. If I would have known now, or if I would have known back then what I know now, as an adult, as a young adult, when I was dating and being special, if I could have infused my old man knowledge into my young brain back then, I may have chosen and dated way differently. I know I would have. So watch how God protects young men and young women who are stupid, like they all are. Is they take old people knowledge that even the young people go, you're stupid and old and you don't know what you're talking about. But they allow the old people to infuse their decisions. And when we look at arranged marriages, we go, that's the most archaic, barbaric, ridiculous format that could ever be come up with for dating. Let's talk about today's dating. How's that going? How's this amazing individual autonomy marriages going? A disaster. Absolute disaster, right? The marriage in the West is a disaster. It's because we have gone about finding our mates in a disastrous way, with no education from the past, no involvement of the family, and really no care for God. Either through arranged marriages or courting with parental oversight. This was because every culture understood marriage involved the combining of two families, not just two people. Never in history has finding a mate been done like modern dating. Practice doesn't make perfect, so don't just date to date. I've heard some people go, oh, you know what? I got to get out there. What? You got to get out there? What does that even mean? I got to go date. What do you mean you got to go date? I got to go, get experience and stuff. And I got to go date. Find the fish in the sea. Got to throw some bait in there. I'm not understanding your dating ideas, really. Yeah, I got to see who's out there. Okay, yeah, I'm good. I'm not just saying be with the first person that is wearing a nice, boots or whatever. I'm saying, be discerning. But what I'm saying is the way you're going about it is incorrect because practice doesn't make perfect in dating. And for those of us that have dated a lot, you don't become a better dater. In fact, things get worse as you get more desperate, right? As you go, I'm running out of people to date. She's good enough. That's great. That's fine. Whatever. Can she walk? Okay, perfect. My point here is that practice never makes perfect in dating. You ask the Lord to give you wisdom. And you see a young lady for who she is. You see a young man for who he is. Watch this. Ready? That's really going to bend some of your minds. Young ladies, you may or may not realize it, but what you really want is a loving leader of your home. You really want a man that is going to actually lovingly lead your home. A guy you don't have to prod to love you or the kids or to go to work or to do the things that would be required of a man in his home. What you really want is a man that's going to love you and love your kids and lead your home so that you don't have to do everything. But what we've done is we've said to our daughters, and we've said to them, hey, just go do whatever you want. And if you have to lead your home, great. And you know what that's created? That's created wimpy, cheesy little men that don't actually lead their home because their wives run the home. And they emotionally manipulate their husbands going, what's in it for me? And the husbands go, I'm out of here. I'll see you. I'm going out to Schlitz land. And so we've actually, in many ways, ladies, when they're looking for a young man, what they really desperately want is a man that is going to lead their home and love them so they don't have to do everything. And so, one lady's with me, all right, good. And young men, what they may or may not realize is what they desperately need is a helper, somebody that's going to come alongside them, a companion, somebody that's going to be with them for their whole lives. If we could wrap our minds around how God has actually built men and women rather than how our culture has tried to create men and women, we would understand that our marriages could be fruitful and fulfilling. Not perfect, but you'd be amazed at how men and women go, our marriage isn't perfect, but man, I'm more in love with my spouse now, 20, 30, 40 years later, than I ever was at year 1, 2, 3. And the reason for that is because when everybody finds their place in the home and they act out exactly what they're supposed to be doing, they honor God, then everyone feels honored. When everybody does their own thing, goes, what's in it for me? Where's my happiness? Then everybody feels dishonored because you don't care about anyone else. And you definitely don't care about God. So when you go about dating, here's what I would say to you. Or if you're going to talk to people about dating, is practice doesn't make perfect. You decide what you want out of a godly young man, you decide what you want out of a godly young lady, and you involve other people in the decision. They come to meet your family. When my son asked a young lady to homecoming, guess what? I had a freaked out 14-year-old boy walking up to a very large man that was the father of the girl he wanted to ask out for homecoming. And he goes, Dad, nobody does that stuff. I go, guess what, Caleb? You're going to go up to that young lady's father, and you're going to ask him if you can take his daughter to homecoming. He goes, Dad, nobody does it. They just text people, want to go to homecoming? You're so old-fashioned. I go, listen, let me tell you something, son. I can tell you one thing. I can guarantee you this, son. I'm not old-fashioned. If there's one thing I'm not, is old-fashioned. But I can tell you this, I'm all about Jesus. And there's a hierarchy in the home. The reason God has put that father over that young lady is not for your enjoyment. It's that you go through him to find out if you can date his daughter. What we've done in our society, we've opened up the door to the family and everybody can kind of come and go however they want and grab whoever they want and leave with whoever they want. And that's created a disaster. And so I said, son, you love that fine young lady, you'd like to take her to homecoming? Awesome. You're going to talk to her dad. He goes, can I just text him? I'm like, nope. This you're going to do the old-fashioned way. You're going to walk face-to-face, mano a mano, face-to-face, and you're going to ask him. And you know what? He lived a long ways away. It was a big hassle. So he came to one of Caleb's football games. And after the football game, he walked up and he asked her father to if he could take his daughter to the dance. And we were there. So it was awesome. So we're standing around in this huddle while my kid's going, dun, dun, dun. And he was very awesome about it. He's like, yeah, I appreciate you doing that, and la, la, la. And so they got a chance to talk about it. But here's what it did, and here's the reason I bring that up. Here's what it did, is it set an authority that my son cannot overstep that boundary. Because you overstep a boundary with a young lady whose father's involved, you better buckle up. But if you go out with a young lady there's no boundary, there's no father, there's no mother that cares, and it's just a free-for-all, then it's like, oh, okay, then young men feel like they can push a boundary as far as they want. Right? But if there's a boundary, if you know you're going to talk to El Pape when you get home, then it's like, okay. See, because men need boundaries. Because men are boundary pushers. And if there's not a boundary there, men will run right over it. That's how God built men. That's why men create companies and countries and name cities after themselves. That's how driven men are. So they need boundaries to stay within, especially young men. He's like, I'm out of here. He's like, I'm going to go find myself a date right now. Yeah, go talk to Dad. The critical question is not who should I date, but rather who am I? And I'm going to close with this, okay? And I want you to see that. I always get asked this question, how do I know who I should date? As a pastor, I've fielded this question in 20 years thousands of times, and here's what I tell young men and young ladies. It's not about who you should date. The question is, who am I? Because who you are will dictate who and how you date. If you know who you are, if you know you're a child of God, if you know that Jesus has transformed your heart as a young lady, you're not going to go after some tool that says he loves you. If you know you are a young man whose heart God has changed, you're not going to go after a young lady because she's hot. You're going to go after the person who has a heart of God. That's different because your eyes will deceive you. Your feelings will deceive you, but God will never deceive you. If you seek the wisdom of God and the wisdom of other godly people when you date, you will never go wrong. You will not marry a perfect person, but you will never go wrong because God will protect you. Because knowing who you are will directly determine who and how you date. There is no such thing as missionary dating. As God would not call anyone to be with a non-believer. And this passage in 2 Corinthians, so it's a book right after this, 2 Corinthians 6, 14 and 15, it says, do not be yoked with unbelievers. And I got a picture of that. This is literally what that would have meant in an agricultural culture. So this was Paul's idea of dating. If you're going to date, see, if this yoke wasn't on these two cows, cows can roam free. Hey, I'm free, cow. Eat this grass, eat this grass, eat this grass. I'm a free cow. I'm free. However, when I get married, I get yoked to another cow. Whoever that is in the marriage, I don't know. I'm just saying for the sake of the illustration. You are literally yoked together. And so this is exactly how cattle would have been put together to increase the strength to actually do work in the field. So the farmer would have gone behind the cattle, giving them direction. But the cattle that are yoked together now can never go the single way anymore. Whoever goes one way pulls the other. Whoever goes one way pulls the other. That is why you must choose somebody that loves Jesus. Never can you say, oh, but he's so awesome. He's awesome? Yeah, he's so awesome. What does he do? He opened a door for me one time. Our standards have gone through the... He looked at me and said he liked me. He liked my Facebook picture. It's like, where's our standard? Because if you're going to love somebody that loves Jesus, when you get hooked up in marriage, by illustration, you should be going the same way, which is where Jesus is going. If one of you says, I'm going to missionary date, I'm going to try to, you know what happens? The person that does not love God will always pull the other person down. The person who does not love God will always pull the other person down. He's back! Hey, praise God. There's more. You missed a good part. So I want to be clear about that, because you know what? I get this from young ladies a lot. Oh, he's been to church. Oh, he can spell Jesus. So he's good. No, sweetie, he's not good. He's not good, okay? Your standard is not how low from the bottom of the barrel can I pick. Your standard is this who Jesus wants for me? And if godly people say he's awesome, then I would say thumbs up to you. If godly people go, he's a total tool, dump that bag, then you get rid of him. You don't missionary date. You don't try to bring people to the Lord through your dating adventures. You find the person God has for you. I'm not saying it never works. What I'm saying is it never works. Okay? I know some of you are like, oh, but I was dating him and he came to the Lord. Okay, but that was not God's will. You just screwed up and God had mercy on you. Okay? Let's just be straight. The Bible's very clear. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, because where one goes, the other one goes. And it's never towards God if the person doesn't have God in their life. It never is. Don't say it is, because it isn't. Before I was saved, before Jesus changed my life, I had no desire for God at all. So don't tell me a young lady's going to pull me towards God, because I can tell you guaranteed I was going to drag her down. Until married, treat all dates like a brother or sister with absolute sexual purity. I'm going to end on this. Ready? Here's what I tell all the people. Ready? Here's what I tell them. And this is what I told my son, literally last night. Because I sat down and had this like father-son moment with my son. And because the girl came over to the house. She's just a sweet young lady. And so I gave them permission to pursue more than whatever. And more than just saying hello or whatever. And I said, son, here's the deal. Out of 1 Timothy, you know 1 Timothy? And I put that in your notes right there, 1 Timothy 5, 1 and 2. I said, you know how you treat her? You treat her like she was your sister or your mother. And that'll change what you do with her. Because if you treat her like your sister or your mother, that'll change the way you think about her. She's not a date to be conquered. She's a beautiful creation of God to be cherished and protected And you as a young man, that should be your goal. Young ladies, you treat those men in your life like your brothers. The things that you wouldn't do with your brother, don't do with your date. Uh-huh. Right. That's exactly what Paul says. You treat women with absolute purity if you're a young man, like a sister. You treat young men, if you're a young lady, with absolute purity like your own brother. Because watch this. Ideally, I'm not saying it's happened for all of us, but ideally, here's God's plan. A person that's treated, a young man that's treated a young lady with purity and honor, and a young woman that's treated a young man with purity and honor, when they get married, it's game on. Right? We looked at married sex 2 weeks ago. God's like, party on. Inside of this boundary, go nuts. Outside of this boundary, don't do anything. But once you've entered into marriage, this is your opportunity. Inside of here, go for it. I'm pleased. Jesus is like, rock on. Outside of here, he goes, no. Because inside of this boundary of marriage is God's desire for you. So whoever you invite into this boundary had better love Christ too if you love Jesus. Paul encourages all singles to work for God while they wait for God. Use your time wisely, single people. Guess what? We have great opportunities now if we're going to be moving over there. Right? All you single people that are going to bed at 3 a.m. because you're killing zombies in another realm or whatever you're doing. Thank you for saving the world, by the way, from Nazis and zombies. I appreciate that. But some of you guys need to put your time into things that matter. And we're going to have fantastic opportunities for you to serve God with your time if we move over to Margarita. Right? So I'm helping you apply what we've heard today.